Steven, please.
Just want to welcome everyone. Thank you very much for, if you don't live here, for absolutely braving the cold, and if you do live here, for braving the roads to get over here this morning. We are going to talk a little bit this morning about why shouldn't you have a BVO program, right? Everyone should have one. So Gary's going to start us off. We're going to do a little bit of audience participation, so we're going to let you have your phones out. Because we want you to text answers to our live poll. So as we go along, we're going to ask some polling questions, and Gary's going to take you through how that works exactly. But please participate and have a little bit of fun. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. The poll questions are anonymous. There is a word cloud. Have fun with that already, I'll say. But we're going to start with instructions, and it's quite simple. From your phone, we'll ask that you send a text message to the number 22333, and the text that you want to send is HSR Relo. I'm going to do that myself. Number 22333, and send the word HSR ELO. If you do it right, which I did not, I sent it to Relo. Forgot the S. You should get a reply. HSRELO. I think you autocorrect. All right, so I'm hearing some murmuring, which means some of us are getting replies. Bingo. You've joined Steve and John's session. Very good. All right, so now that that's done, our first question, which is really just to get our wheels turning, is exactly how tall is that guy? Now, I work for Steven, so it's easy to find him in the room. Like, just scan the heads, and there's Steven. So your choices are 6'4", 6'5", 6'7", 7 foot, and as you can see, it's real time. I'll give it a few more seconds. And the survey says,
Whoops, go back.
There.
6'7". Yes, 6'7" was correct. So if you said 6'7", the answer is C.
We must have used this question before.
We have used this question before. It's our easy go-to. And quietly kind of us just go like, oh man, this guy's really tall. All right, so moving right along, if we can. No matter how long you've been in the industry, you've probably heard the term BVO, buyer value option. This is the word cloud. So when the term BVO comes to mind, what is the one word that you think of when you hear the acronym BVO? And if you could reply with that, we will start to see responses. These are actually really fun. Costly, risky, savings, I like that, thank you. Wow, outdated got a lot of hits, which is interesting. I should have started with introductions. I've worked in the business for the past 17 years. In the past 5 years, what's the fastest growing type of relocation benefit?
Lump sum.
Thank you. I mean, this is like, I should just sit down. It's the lump sum, and we all know that. And I think the whole reason why we went through this exercise was to say, lump sums have their place. Don't get me wrong, I know that they do. But are they the be-all, end-all? And our intent here is to push back on that a little bit and say that the lump sum, while again, certainly has its position in our industry, the BVO, everyone thinks it's outdated, but is it really? Has it gone extinct? And I'm going to argue that it has not. But before we talk about what the BVO is and why it should be part of your program, let's take a minute and walk down memory lane. So before the BVO, if a company wanted to relocate a homeowner and reimburse that homeowner for the cost of selling their home, the way that they would typically do that was what we would call a direct reimbursement. And to walk you through that process, it starts with the employee just finding a realtor and selling their home. And then the employer would ask for what we used to call the HUD statement and literally just reimburse them for the cost of selling the home, which would be a commission paid to a real estate agent and then attorney costs or closing costs. Excuse me. The problem with that is that the IRS viewed those monies as income. And as such, the end result is that the employee was responsible for tax on those funds. But then in 1972, and I actually asked Peggy when I saw her in Arizona late last year if she knew who it was that had this idea. And she didn't know. And so if anybody who's been here longer than I have knows who it was that thought of this, I'd love to know. But someone had the idea, a light bulb moment, what if we process these transactions as two separate entities? What if the employee actually sold their home to a relocation company? And then the relocation company sold that home to an outside buyer. Two separate transactions. They presented that idea to the IRS, positioned it as the employer actually incurring the cost of selling the home, the attorney fees, the closing costs. Is that still income to the employee? And the IRS said, no, it's not. That's not income to the employee. And because it's not income to the employee, we now no longer have a taxable event, right? Make sense? And voila, the BVO was born. IRS ruling 72339, which when you take your CRP, is something you'll need to know. So memorize those little numbers there because it's on the exam. And so let's look at the math again and put some numbers to it. So let's say a $300,000 home with an expense of a selling expense of a 6% commission and then 1.5% in attorney fees or closing costs. What does that come to in math? That's $22,500 that, if done by way of a direct reimbursement, is classified as income to the employee. So we all love doing math. What does that mean from a tax perspective? So today, that would mean the employee would owe the federal supplemental rate of 22%, and then the state tax in Minnesota plus FICA tax, which comes to, I'm sorry, I forgot the fun part. If a company gives a gross up to an employee, the IRS classifies the gross up as taxable. So now we have the infamous tax on the tax scenario, right? Where the gross up itself has to be accounted for, which increases our tax rate further to a number of 56%. And the math on that is that the gross up cost to the company for this scenario would be $12,600. Well, let's do the math in a BVO scenario. So same value of the home, same cost of sale, but this time, due to the fact that it's a business expense, there is no reimbursement to the employee, there is no taxable income, ergo there is no gross up needed. We have saved the 12.6. And if we just did 10 of those a year, which I last year met with a company in Wisconsin that made cheese, and they did 5 a year. So if we just did 10 of these a year, we'd save $126,000, right? I see a finger raised.
But you have the risk of owning the house.
Oh, I love it. Please say that again.
But you have the risk of owning the house.
That's right, you do have your risk. They're gonna think you're a plant. They're gonna think you're a plant. All right, so another poll question, if we can, please. Get your phones back out. Why don't you as a company, or why don't you think that companies have a BVO? Thank you again. I knew that C would get some hits. Thanks for coming in, Gary, but I'm playing the CFO here. We are not in the business of owning homes. All right, so these are common answers that I think we all hear all the time. We're not going to take that risk, and part of that risk is if it were to happen, we are not going to take the responsibility of owning someone's house. Totally get it. Let's explore that though.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Great introduction, and I like the way everyone's honing in on those answers. Just stand in a certain spot. So the first comment that came up was, wow, it's really too risky, right? We don't want to be in a position where we're going to lose a lot of extra money because a BVO falls through, etc. So let's talk about the risk a little bit. What is the risk on this kind of a program? So the risk is that we lose the buyer, right? So we've gone through the marketing period, we've identified a buyer, we've agreed on a price, we've agreed on terms, and now the RMC steps in, and as the RMC, we buy the home from the transferee. And then the buyer gets hit by a bus. I'm sorry, we should probably think of something more joyful than that. The buyer inherits lots of money and decides they want to buy a bigger home.
I was going to say the buyer got arrested. I had that happen once. Arrested, but
Lots of
maybe that
things.
was another item. Sorry.
Lots of things happen to buyers. But anyway, occasionally that happens. The buyer goes away, they cannot for some reason consummate the deal, and at this point, the RMC owns the home on behalf of the client. Everything's done on behalf of the client. Is that dangerous? Well, a new buyer must be found, right? So now we own the home, now we gotta sell it again. So what happens in that case? Why is that a problem? Well, there's gonna be additional carry costs, right? It's gonna take us 30, 60, 90, 120 days to sell the home. There may be loss on sale costs, etc. I think what's interesting about it is, one, people think about this risk as it happens all the time. And the reality is it doesn't. This is one of those things like I worry about getting hit by lightning, when in the reality it doesn't really happen that often. And so let's talk about how often it really happens first. So what is the historical fallout rate for BVOs? Get on your phones, let's see what y'all think. If you look at it traditionally, out of 100 transactions, 100 BVO transactions, what percentage fall out? Okay, so we got 15% at 1%, 46% at 2%, 31% at 5%, and 8% of you think it happens 7% of the time. And the answer is, survey says, this is according to ERC data, just shy of 2%. Now, I'll tell you, and this is my experience, I've been in the industry most of this century. Let's just say it that way, right? Sounds like a long time, doesn't it?
It does.
And for the most part, what I've seen is kind of the 2% number. The worst I've seen is 3%, and that was in 2007, 2008, 2009, when things were not quite so good. Right now, we're running less than 1%. Market's good. Things are good. So the risk really isn't that great, and let's just go with the historical 2% number, right? If it happens 2 times out of every 100, well, that's not really a big risk. You're not taking this huge chance. You're not betting the farm by having a BVO program. So let's look at that, because as business professionals, one of our jobs is to understand risk. And if you ever talk to a risk management person, and please do so in the morning when you've had a lot of coffee, they'll tell you about the various reasons or the various things that they would do about risk. There's like 4 standard things you do with risk. You mitigate it, you manage it, you can slough it off to someone else on an insurance policy, or you can accept the risk. There are many business risks that we take today that we simply accept. We say, yep, I know that's a risk, I've done what I can to try and mitigate it, but whatever's left, I'm just gonna accept, and I'm gonna understand that there's a cost associated with it. There is a quantifiable cost associated with BVO fallouts. Now remember, there's an advantage too, right? For every $300,000 home, we're saving $12,600. And I'm gonna do that 100 times before I have 2 fall out. So I need to compare that 12,600 times 100 transactions to whatever the cost might be when those 2 fall out. And that really becomes kind of my cost equation here. So let's look at that example. In a BVO fallout, and again, I have the same selling costs on both sides, $22,500. We have gross up costs on the direct reimbursement side, right? So it cost me another $12,600 there. Now let's see what happens. So now I have a fallout. Let's say I carry this home for another 3 months before I sell it. Again, that's probably more traditional markets several years ago. Today's market, I'm gonna sell that thing in another 30 days, but whatever. Let's assume 3 months, I'm going to incur another $13,500 in carrying costs. Let's say I even have a loss on sale. I really wanna get rid of this thing, I'm gonna cut it another 5%. So now my total cost is $51,000 versus what I would have had in a direct reimbursement program of $35,100. So I've lost $15,900. One, this is just one home. We're just talking about if one home fell out versus one home that I did under direct reimbursement, I would lose about 16 grand. One, it's not a huge number, but two, what we'll see is that it gets quickly overwhelmed by the additional homes that I'm gonna run through the program. So if I have one fall out, my cost is, the additional cost is $28,500 on one home. But if I have 10 homeowners, just 10, so now what we're really postulating here is I have a 10% fallout rate, right? 1 out of 10. Well, in that case, I saved $126,000. It cost me $28,500. I still made close to $100,000 with my BVO program. This is not about, when people say the program is too risky, what they're really saying is, I don't want to take any risk at all. I'm not willing to take a little bit of risk to save a lot more money. And that's really what we're agreeing to with the BVO program. There's an understanding that there's a little bit of risk there. But the real understanding is that there's a huge opportunity for cost savings that even with the risk embedded and quantified, which we can do, you're still saving lots of money. Even more so if you actually had 100 homes, if you thought about that math, it's a huge savings compared to a relatively minor risk.
There's another bullet there that actually shows, I think it was 97, yeah.
There you go.
97.
Almost $100,000. What's interesting is being part of a Berkshire Hathaway company. Berkshire Hathaway owns lots of insurance companies, and every insurance company that we talk to would be like, really, that's a great deal. I'd take that every day. Because they understand the concept of risk versus reward, and that's really what we're looking at with this kind of a program. Okay, so the risk of fallout isn't that great. Even if you had a fallout, right, the additional cost you're going to incur is certainly not more than the savings you have on the rest of the program. So why not do it? Let's keep going. Oh, so some people feel like the program is too complex, right? There's way too many things involved. There's all of these 11 key element things, you know, we don't want to get, it's way too complex. I don't want to do it. So let's get on your phones again, and what is the major purpose of ERC's 11 key elements for home sale programs? A, to ensure compliance for RESPA. B, to allow for double deed processing. C, to ensure 2 separate sales. Or D, to make things complicated, which is really why we have jobs, okay? Everyone in the room, just thank the regulators for regulation, because that's why you have a job. All right, so it looks like survey says, for the most part, to ensure 2 separate sales, and you are correct. Every one of the key elements, and obviously the ERC recommends that you comply with all 11. But it's not a rule, it's not a regulation, it's not something the IRS put out. The 11 key elements were developed by the folks at ERC, and the purpose of each element is to further document and demonstrate that it's really 2 separate transactions. And that's what they want to do, and the point here is if you follow the 11 key elements, one, you will protect the tax advantages of the program, and then two, it will actually keep your program in compliance. All right, so if it is too complex, what do we need to do?
Make it simpler.
Make it simple. One, home sale programs have been around for over 40 years. This is really the genesis of the industry. This is how, you know, Gary's point, somebody had a bright idea and we'd like to find that person and thank them. The ERC has provided the specific guidelines, so that's why we have the 11 key elements. So it's not like a big mystery. We've been doing it for a long, long time. There are guidelines in place, and if you follow them, you're gonna do okay. And the RMCs of the world have developed significant expertise in this area. This is certainly one of those areas, though, where you want to hire an expert, right? You don't, as a corporation, want to have this as an in-house program. It's a lot of extra work. That's why RMC is around, and we certainly would recommend that you go to an expert in order to run your BVO program. Certainly a safer and more efficient way to go.
If I could add, to do it in-house, they would have to have a broker's license to be compliant, right?
It would help, yes. It's part of the complexity. So, the next argument is, well, we're not in the business of owning homes, which is kind of a funny sort of argument, right? Because there's lots of things that corporations do that they're not in the business of. So the entire HR department is, I'm not in the business of that. You know, we make widgets and sell widgets. I have an HR department because I have people and I need this other stuff, payroll and compliance and benefits and 401ks, and no, I could buy some homes and that would help. So it's really not about whether you want to be in that business or not. Where you get this argument from a lot of times is from CFOs and the way they perceive the taxation and the classification of the asset. And I'm going to get really nerdy here on you for a few seconds, so just bear with me. What a lot of CFOs fear is that these costs will be treated as capital losses, not ordinary losses. And so again, the difference being that now all of a sudden I own a home, I have expenses on that home, I may have a loss on that home, and what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to deduct all those expenses against my normal expenses, my normal income. And that has the best tax advantage. What some people are afraid of is that it's going to be classed as a capital cost, and capital costs are taxed at a different rate. Now, the reality is that position is not supported by IRS case law. There's not any real regulation around it, but the cases that have gone through the courts have said no, it really is an ordinary loss, and you can take advantage of ordinary income tax rates. In some cases, if it really was determined to be a capital cost, you still get to deduct it, you just don't get to deduct it at the same tax rate. So it's not like all of a sudden they're going to eliminate all of these deductions. It would just happen to happen at a lower rate. However, that's never happened. So I think we're safe in assuming that we can use these costs as normal costs. And there's lots of case law out there that demonstrates this. And again, this becomes this real kind of esoteric conversation that your CFO has with your tax manager, and the HR person sits in the back of the room and goes, I don't know what's going on. But one of the reasons to hire an expert. I'm happy to talk to any CFOs or any tax managers about the benefits of this kind of program. Okay, what percentage of American families are homeowners currently, approximate rate? Get on your phones, 75, 65, 45, or 50%. And it looks like the winner is 45%. The actual number right now is 65%. Just under 65, it's like 64 point something. And what's interesting about this is it says that 65% of your transferees are going to need this service. They're going to need to sell their home for the most part. And so they're going to incur costs, whether you have a BVO program or not, and then you need to decide, you know, well, how much money am I going to spend? And that's really the last argument here, is that many companies look at a BVO program and they just go, wow, it's just too expensive. I don't want to spend that much on my transferee. And you know, if you have a program or you work with folks who have programs and they're only willing to spend $5,000 or whatever, yeah, then probably a BVO program is not for them. But when you think about how many homeowners there are, 65% of your transferees are going to be a homeowner. Well, that means that you need to think about how successful do I want this relocation to be? Do I want to encourage folks to transfer? Do I want to encourage my new recruits to come to me? We're seeing significantly more competition in the search for talent. One of the reasons why Gary and I decided to do this presentation is we've actually taken probably 4 or 5 existing clients from direct reimbursement, marketing assistance kind of programs, only 2 BVO programs over the last few years. It has become more of a trend. It's funny because there is this lump sum trend out there, but in competitive markets with competitive labor pools, we're seeing an opposite trend. How can I tweak up my benefits a little bit to make sure that, one, my transfers are successful and that I recruit and retain where I want to. The most expensive thing in the world is a failed relocation, right? So I think I just said all of this. I always look at this statistic too. So this is according to the Work Institute. It costs 33% of an annual survey to replace a lost employee. We put a lot of time and effort into our employees. I don't care what kind of industry you're in, you're going to train people, they're going to be inculcated into your culture. You don't want them just running off because we can't seem to figure out how to get them moved when we need them in a new location. And it's so important to retain people, and this is a kind of number you can use comparatively, right? If I have a $100,000 employee and they're working out just fine and I want to move them someplace, well, if the alternative is, if somebody says, well, you can't spend, $10,000 to move that person, it's like, oh really, it's going to cost me $35,000 to replace them, and then 6 more months to get them up to speed. And if it's an experienced person, it's another 3 or 4 or 5 years before they get to where that person was. The cost to replace experienced personnel is huge, and generally underwhelmed by whatever it might cost us to actually relocate them. Really, can you afford not to have a BVO program? So thanks to the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017, which went into effect January 1st, 2018, there are no more tax-free programs. Household goods is taxable, temp lodging is taxable, final move is taxable. All of these things that you might give to your employees as benefits are taxable. So essentially what that's done, and kind of a lot of folks who wanted to have smaller programs and smaller sets of benefits retreated back to, well, we'll just pay for household goods and final move because those are tax-free. Well, not anymore. So if you were paying, $20,000 for those benefits in the past, now you're paying $30,000 for those benefits. What's nice about it, however, is that the BVO is still the only remaining tax-free benefit you can give to your employees. So when you think about it, if you are limited in the amount of relocation dollars you can give, you are much more efficient and much better off by doing a BVO program for homeowners than giving them any amount of money for any other benefit. $30,000 spent on a lump sum is really only $19,000. $30,000 spent on BVOs is $30,000. Another way to do it is if you gave them a $30,000 lump sum and you grossed it up, it would be $45,000 in expense. Whereas if you do a $30,000 BVO, it's $30,000. So even if your population of funds is somewhat limited, if you can squeeze in that BVO, then you're much better off than spending those same dollars on some other benefit. Again, that only works for your homeowners. They're the only ones who are interested, but it's a real interesting way to think about the dollars that you're spending and how they get the real impact of those dollars. So many people are like, well, yeah, that's all well and good, I love that, but I still can't do it because whatever. Think about a fixed fee program. Home Services, as well as a variety of other RMCs, offer fixed fee programs. These are programs where the RMC comes in and purchases the home on a risk-free basis. So you're out of it. You still get some of the savings, costs you a little bit more because now the RMC has to get a risk premium. But net, you're still going to spend less on your home sale program than if you had a direct reimbursement program. So I guess there's really no excuses then, right? See me later about your BVO program. And I think it really goes back to, business always includes some risk. And it's our job to manage that risk. And you can hire an expert to help you manage it. I think that's a good idea. But the risk itself is incredibly manageable and incredibly small. And if we know the risk, then we know how to go get the reward. And that's the key here. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Any questions?
Any questions? One question right here.
Yeah, this is kind of off topic, but I'm just curious to know if you have an opinion.
I always have an opinion, Tom.
I know, actually, I kind of know that. You've heard of open door, fly homes, some of these concepts that are out there right now, and I saw, fixed BVO. Can you contrast those? And I'm just curious if you guys or anybody in the room has heard on whether or not the IRS considers that to be any kind of a taxable burden to the employee.
So Tom's question is about some companies out there which are offering, and really, so let's talk about in the consumer space for a second. So from a consumer perspective, they go, you want to get out of your home, we'll come in, we'll buy your home, and no questions asked, you're out. There's a couple things going on there. One, what we're finding is that what a lot of those programs are really programs meant to entice you to call them first. So when you look at the real estate industry today, there's a tremendous number of disintermediation that occurs between the broker and the consumer, where companies from a variety of perspectives, so whether it's, and I'm going to name some names, and it's not meant to be critical. Quicken Loans, for instance, has Rocket Homes, and when people call Quicken Loans, they are very quick to try and grab them and say, can I refer you to a broker? And when they do that, they charge a referral fee. There's a company called HomeServices that's working with other banks that's doing the same thing. They work with the bank, somebody calls the bank, I'm thinking about buying a home, I need a mortgage. They go, great, can we refer you to a broker? Because then they can collect a referral fee.
Fly homes.
Opcity, yeah, and so now let's talk about the folks you're talking about. The Open Door,
Fly homes.
there was one called Purple Bricks, I think they went out of business.
Already.
And I believe Realogy is doing it with Home Partners of America behind them. What they're essentially trying to do is, again, get you to call them first, right? Oh, wow, I can get somebody to just buy my home and I can just, run away. Well, what you find is that, they're gonna give you a low ball appraisal, they're gonna charge you more than a 6% commission, and in the grand scheme of things, yeah, that doesn't sound too good, maybe I really wanna put it on the market. Okay, let me recommend you to a broker, right? And then they get to charge a referral fee. The stats right now show that less than 5% of those deals are going through as actual purchases. So for the most part, it's really just that opportunity. There's another company out there now that's giving ratings and rankings on performance of agents. Call us first and use our software to find who's the smartest, best-selling agent in your neighborhood. Again, the same thing. They're going to refer you to somebody and get a referral for that. So there's lots of people trying to get in the middle. Yes?
I'd like to comment. So I'm with a title company, National Settlement Services, Spruce, and I've been in the industry now for 32 years, and I have seen such a shift in the way people are buying and selling homes. To this gentleman's point, a lot of iBuyers going on. And what's interesting is when you look at it in terms of BVO and the sort of concern about the risk, I think your risk even diminishes further because you do have a lot of iBuyers out there to pick that property up from you. And so I know, you're saying 5%, but I can see from the chair I'm sitting that it's such a significant shift in the way that people are buying and selling homes to a lot of the iBuyers that are out there, and people do want the convenience, and I know it's sad because it's diminishing the real estate, and it's a very controversial subject, but I think everybody's kinda gotta face that and find a way, to sort of, like, try and reap the benefit of what
Yeah, it's
they are
definitely a
doing.
trend that we wanna watch, and I think that's interesting. And then from a relocation perspective, is that a way to get your transferee out of their home quicker and for, ultimately less money? So I think it's certainly worth looking.
But is an iBuyer gonna process a tax-protected home sale program, a BVO program? And the
But
answer is
it's
no.
a traditional
It's
sale,
more
it's a
traditional.
traditional sale,
Right,
so you
right.
don't have to worry about that.
Well,
Ah.
it still becomes taxable,
And they
so.
get you out in 14 days because they're all cash.
I mean,
So-
potentially what you could do is you could,
No, I hear you.
as the RMC, you could be the iBuyer. So, I mean, you can still make it work that way.
I mean, I know it's a very controversial subject, especially in the real estate community, but they're all cash buyers and you can get out of the home in 14 days.
We should never be afraid of controversial subjects.
Yeah, I don't
Talk about it.
I don't think
not talk about it.
controversy is the right term for it. The question in the long run will be, how well does it work and how many people will
Yeah,
live
is it a
there?
bubble, is it not, but you might as well reap the benefit
Yeah,
of it.
see what
also.
happens.
So the other question I would have about the whole thing is that if there's a downturn in the market,
You read my mind. Say it in the mic.
So-
Yeah.
that's what I think about, cause I worked at a company, an RMC that will remain nameless, that might, just recently bought a large RMC.
I mean, the biggest RMC in the nation?
That might be the one.
That one?
Were you there? Yeah, we lived through that, but, all kidding aside, the danger zone that they stepped into is they had a bunch of single-digit fixed fee programs with clients,
Mhm.
right? And, I mean, it's crazy, so, when the market goes into a downturn.
It wasn't crazy in 2006.
Well, no, actually 2004 would be even better, but, I think when there's a downturn in the market, it's gonna be the real proof of the pudding as to whether these companies are sustainable. So, it's just very interesting to watch.
That's not gonna happen though, right, Tom? No downturn. No
No, there's never gonna
downturn.
happen.
Never again.
Never again.
The market will never, ever
Never
go
go
down.
down again. You heard it here first.
But is it the wave of the future, right? I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
the way things are changing, is it the way of the future?
You gotta be around. it.
had heard at the last meeting I just went to, that Open Door is leaving Minnesota.
Are
Because
they?
they can't,
There's a local broker here too. Martin, what's the guy's name here who does that?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. That guy, yeah, Chris Laventhal.
we
Yeah.
don't say that name.
Oh, whatever. It's billboards on every freeway around town, so you can hardly miss him. But yeah, there's lots of iBuyer type programs out there, and I don't know that some of them, I think Chris has had a program for a long, long time. Yeah, and then we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see what happens. Yeah.
We will see is
We
the
will see.
answer, right?
We will see.
All right, we are at our time. Any last questions before we adjourn? If not, I'll say thank you. Thank you for attending.
Thank you,
This
guys.
was informative.